This is your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, November 6, 2013. I'm Russ Belville. Recreational pot legalized in 4 U.S. cities by a 2-to-1 margin, from hightimes.com. Election Day 2013 found 4 U.S. cities, Portland, Maine, and Ferndale, Jackson, and Lansing, Michigan, voting on proposals to decriminalize or legalize personal possession of marijuana. In all 4 cities, marijuana reform passed by overwhelming margins. Portland, Maine voted on legalization of 2.5 ounces of marijuana. Voters supported that proposal with 67% of the vote. The proposal does not legalize cultivation or sale, but does allow for adults 21 and older in Portland city limits to, quote, engage in activities for the purposes of ascertaining the possession of marijuana and paraphernalia, end quote, which presumably allows for the sharing of marijuana between adults. Ferndale, Jackson, and Lansing, Michigan all voted to amend their city charters so, quote, nothing in the Code of Ordinances shall apply to the use, possession, and transfer of less than 1 ounce of marijuana on private property by a person who has attained 21 years of age. End quote. Again, cultivation and sales are not allowed, but sharing would be allowed. Ferndale passed its measure 2332 to 1035, 69% support. Jackson passed its measure 2242 to 1434, 61% support. Lansing passed its measure 8550 to 5339, 62% support. Aggregating these Michigan votes and adding in the 9,921 yes votes and 4,823 no votes from Portland's referendum, we have 4 cities that have approved marijuana legalization by a nearly 2-to-1 margin. Colorado voters approved new taxes on recreational marijuana, from the Denver Post. A measure to impose hefty taxes on recreational marijuana passed easily Tuesday as voters across the state overwhelmingly chose to make pot one of the most heavily taxed consumer products in Colorado. At 10 p.m., Proposition AA was leading 65% to 35%. Colorado's Attorney General and a number of marijuana business owners, politically strange bedfellows, both supported Proposition AA. Governor John Hickenlooper also supported the tax measure despite his opposition to marijuana legalization. According to the state's voter guide, the measure is expected to bring in $67 million a year. Of that, $27.5 million generated by the excise tax would go towards school construction, as specified in last year's constitutional amendment that legalized the use of recreational marijuana and also allowed for pot to be sold to anyone over 21 at specially licensed stores. The rest of the money will go toward paying for the regulation of the pot shops, as well as any associated impacts of legalization. Michigan Senate looks to move medical marijuana into pharmacies and licensed manufacturing facilities, from MichiganLive.com. Michigan's Republican-led Senate is considering a plan to create a new system for regulating and distributing medical marijuana. Legislation introduced by Senator Roger Kahn and co-sponsored by Senate Majority Leader Randy Richardville seeks to reclassify medical marijuana, license facilities to grow the drug and distribute it through authorized pharmacies. The system, which would require federal approval before it could be implemented, would treat marijuana as a Schedule II drug, similar to OxyContin or Percocet. Anyone wishing to manufacture, distribute, prescribe, or dispense marijuana would have to obtain a license from the Michigan Board of Pharmacy, as already required for other controlled substances. Denver continues to tweak a public pot consumption law, from the Denver Post. In what's become a debate over civil liberties and compliances with a new state law legalizing the recreational use of marijuana, the Denver City Council on Monday floated suggestions on the best ways to regulate the open and public consumption of pot. A recent draft law crafted by Councilman Chris Nevitt and introduced before a council committee allows people in Denver to smoke in their backyards. But under the current draft, consuming marijuana on a front porch visible from the street would be prohibited. Council members such as Paul Lopez were concerned about restrictions on smoking marijuana on a private front porch or balcony. Said Lopez, quote, people should not be criminalized for doing something on their own private property, whether it's drinking a beer, smoking a joint, or smoking a cigarette, end quote. Washington and Colorado courts weigh lawyer pot use and advice, from King5.com. Washington's Supreme Court is taking up an emergency proposal to change the state's ethics rules for lawyers to make clear that attorneys complying with state law won't get in trouble for giving pot-related legal advice or for smoking up themselves, as long as they're not high at work. The Supreme Court in Colorado, the other state to legalize marijuana for recreational use, has been presented with a similar proposal. This has been your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, November 6, 2013. I'm Russ Belville. When we come back, we go behind the headlines, take a look at recent developments in the state of Oregon that lay the foundation for the state becoming the most legal place in the world for marijuana in 2014. Listening to the Russ Belville Show live from Nampa, Idaho on 420radio.org. We'll be right back. Hey, tokers and tokettes, Radical Russ here to introduce you to